Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Embrace the Gridiron. We are now going early in the morning going forward, and we are so glad to be live. I got to mute my little side screen to make sure this podcast looks good. But I'm excited to be back. Nick, you excited to be back?
Absolutely. It's been a little while, but I'm glad to be back.
Let's grab our cups of coffee. It's 9 a.m. Eastern. Let's take a sip this Monday morning, and let's get into it. So we have a crazy sports weekend. Not only is it Thanksgiving football, not only is it the first week that the College Football Ranking Committee is releasing their first rankings, but it's also rivalry week for a lot of big college football games. You got Wisconsin, Minnesota. You have the big game with Cal and Stanford, and many other games across the board. It should be an exciting college football and exciting NFL weekend. Nick, are you ready for this crazy week we're about to have?
Yeah, it's going to be something. It's going to all start with Thursday night football. With Thursday football, we got Thanksgiving, 3 games on the slate, and we jump into some huge college games this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, but before we start talking about this weekend's college football and NFL games, this has been a topic I've been wanting to talk about for actually a few months now. And actually a few years we've been talking about this. And it's, should the college football playoffs expand? What's your quick opinion on
that? I think they got to expand. If you want to get, I don't understand the point of not expanding. The NCAA, it seems like the only thing they care about is, money. And the way to get more, money would be to, maybe have more primetime games that mean a lot, expand the playoffs, get more fans interested. They want to see the underdog. They're going to watch. Everybody has that underdog mentality when this team that, you didn't think would be there and they're there, and it'll increase viewership. It'll get more views than your normal college football championship because you had, more rounds of it and people are getting more invested. It makes too much sense for them not to do it. And it's been going on for years now. Just, they never did it.
Here's the biggest thing, the main excuse everybody uses of why we won't expand. It'll take away the importance of the regular season. Well, if you go 4 and then you add 6, then what about that seventh team? Or if you go 8, what about the 9th team? But at the same time, do you know the line the networks and college football committee uses to decide their 4 teams? It's not the 4 most deserving teams. It's the 4 best teams. And that's where things get a little bit annoying for me as a fan. Because, yes, I understand you want the 4 best teams in the playoffs. But if it's a predetermined thing, like you're always going to have Alabama, you're always going to have Clemson, you're always going to have Ohio State, unless something crazy happens, the regular season isn't important. You had an undefeated UCF team go 12-0, I believe it was 12-0, going into the playoffs, go 12-0 and not make the playoffs. But you had an Alabama team. Granted, Alabama went on to win the national championship this year, but still, looking at the resumes and everything that went into it, you had an Alabama team that didn't even win their division go to the college football playoffs. So you want to talk about making sure the regular season is important? Then you either got to expand the playoffs, or B, change the way you pick these teams. Because it's felt predetermined. And yes, the other argument is, well, if you expand these playoffs, well, teams are going to get blown out. Oh, Cincinnati can't compete with Alabama. Well, we don't know that. The big thing that we're going to be looking out for is on 12-12. Cincinnati plays Tulsa, because Tulsa gave Oklahoma State a game. And if Cincinnati's able to win that game pretty handily, then that shows Cincinnati is one of the big boys this year. They got a fantastic quarterback, Cole Adams, who who sneak peek we're doing a collaboration with later this week, talking about that quarterback, did a great video on his channel talking about the season Cincinnati's been having, and how big would it be for recruiting? Right now, there's 4 teams, and 3 of the 4 are usually the same. 4 probably, you could make the argument that all 4 have been basically the same. 1 or 2 teams changing each year, but like rotating between 1 or 2 teams. Like I said, it's been Alabama, and Clemson, it's been Ohio State, and it's been Oklahoma. Those schools recruit really well, too, because they make the playoffs. How great, and Cole said this in his video about Cincinnati, how great would it be for a recruit going to look at the University of Cincinnati and seeing 2020 college football playoffs, University of Cincinnati? Wow, you got a shot. I want to win champions I want to win a championship if I'm going to play college football at some school. Win a championship and make it to the NFL. Now, you give these shots to these smaller schools like a UCF, Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina, before they lost this week, and BYU. You give one of these teams a shot, all of a sudden they have the possibility of becoming one of the top recruited schools in the nation. And all of a sudden, I think college football is way more exciting. I don't know. Before I continue, why don't you talk about your opinion on what I just said?
I think you're right. I think you're right about that. My opinion kind of mirrors yours in the way it gives not only the little guy a chance, but the recruitment's a huge thing. I mean, and you see like a lot of times these college football games are very unbalanced. Okay, you have, a school like Ole Miss, one of a very historic school. Ole Miss, everybody knows who Ole Miss is, whether they be good or not. They know who Ole Miss is. However, if someone gets an offer from Ole Miss and someone gets an offer from Cincinnati, at times they're going to choose Ole Miss because they're like, hey, we're in the SEC. We may have a better chance of going to playoffs, even though we haven't been good recently. And Cincinnati's been good like the last few years. And they're like, well, they're not in the SEC. So, we probably won't get to the playoffs there. Maybe my exposure will be better. And that whole thing with recruiting, I feel like you're definitely right about. It's something. It's kind of like let's say you're a free agent on an NFL team, right? Are you going to go to, I don't know, are you going to go to that small market team who has a better chance of winning, or are you going to go to the big market team who's mediocre, but you can get your sponsorships? It's kind of like that kind of same parallel where, whatever gives you more opportunities is the place you're going to go. It's the place you're going to go. So I think if we expand the playoffs, it'll give more opportunities widespread over college football for these teams to be competitive, and therefore recruitment won't be as clumped up into the same 15 schools, 20 schools that it normally is. You can get the level of recruitment that you get at, a middle tier college school all around the nation at teams that usually they're scouting only locally because nobody's interested from afar because they're not in the SEC. They're not in the ACC. They're not competitive in the Big Ten, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it brings back that excitement of college football. And it's money. Like you mentioned before, it's more money for college football, more money for the teams, more money for the NCAA. And I get the argument, but I don't get the argument at the same time of why you wouldn't want to expand it. And of all seasons to expand it, this year they should have expanded it, made it 8 teams or 6 teams. You have, I think it's 12 different college football conferences, or 10 or 12 different conferences playing very different schedules. Some are playing 6 games like the Pac-12. And I think the Mountain West is playing 8. While you got the Big Ten playing 8+1. Or you got the ACC playing basically a full season. And and the SEC playing 10 conference games. I don't know what the Americans doing. Are they doing 10 games this season?
With cancellations and stuff, I feel like it's 8. You can quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. I'm probably wrong, but I think it's 8 or 10.
And you're going to decide with only, I think, the Big 12, the American, and ACC had the conference games +1, where you could schedule out of conference games. Where the SEC, you have no one to compare to the SEC. You have no one to compare the Big 10 to. There's no crossover games or any conference games they could even look at and go, well, this team played this team and this team played this team. And when these two teams played, we could look at the different ways each team played against them. And the Pac-12 is playing 6 games in just themselves, and a bunch of those games are being canceled. So how can you decide, let's say Oregon with 1 game canceled, they go 5-0. Clemson loses 2 games. Cincinnati goes undefeated. BYU goes undefeated. And all of a sudden you have this spot of a possible 2-loss team. For this example, Alabama wins the ACC. Notre Dame wins, or Alabama wins the SEC. Notre Dame wins the ACC. Ohio State wins the Big Ten. Who are you going to put in that 4th spot? An undefeated Cincinnati, an undefeated BYU, an undefeated Oregon, or a 2-loss Clemson? Well, if you look at the past, the 2-loss Clemson is probably going to make it in if they keep it close with Notre Dame, which is absurd to me. Why are we playing these games then? Why is the American Conference even in the rankings? If they're not even going to be considered if they go undefeated, why is the Mountain Western Independent Schools even considered in these rankings? I get it, it's for the New Year's Six Bowls, but you could have a separate ranking, or maybe even a separate playoffs if you really don't want to put the non-Power 5 schools in the playoffs. The system's broken. It's almost more broken than the BCS was, and that was a mess. And I only got to see the tail end of that as a fan. I was too young growing up. 99, 199. Yes, I don't remember when it went in. Was it late 90s?
I think so.
But it ended in like 2013. And there was always a mess with that. The playoffs and the committee were supposed to fix the problems the BCS had. Nothing seems very fixed. It feels like duct tape. Well, we'll put a whole piece of duct tape over that hole, and maybe it'll hold. That's my rant on the college football playoffs. Do you have any closing remarks on whether they should expand or not?
Yeah. Okay, so the way this season worked, and you mentioned how this season worked, how teams are playing a lot of interdivision conference games. The way this worked, it's like you can draw a complete comparison to, let's say in the NFL, if you're an NFL fan out there and you're kind of understanding, let's say the NFC East played each other 16 times a year. The NFC East, okay? Let's say the Giants and the Washington football team and the Eagles and the Cowboys just played each other, right? We know how bad they are because they play other teams. But, like, watching these games, we may think one of these teams is the best in the league because they are 14-2 and, like, they're great, but, like, they may not match up well against anybody else. That's the kind of parallel that this is drawing for me. And it's kind of like, and you said it, this year would have been perfect to test out something. If it didn't work, don't do it again. But, you would have got no backlash for this. This year was an exception. You have the Big Ten playing like no games. There were so many cancellations, and you're gonna have a team that Ohio State's gonna play 5 games, 6 games, and they're gonna make the playoffs. They go undefeated. Like
they're gonna. I think it's 8+1, and they had 1 game canceled so far.
Yeah, so far, yeah. So you figure if they play 6 games and they go 6-0, and games are getting canceled, like. What are they just going to go in the playoffs anyway? Even though there's a team that's played more games, won more games, more deserving. It's just a whole big issue, and I feel like college football and the NCAA could have really capitalized on it this year, but they didn't.
Yeah, so if the college football playoff season were to end today, Alabama has a 100% chance of making the playoffs. This is according to the ESPN All-State Predictor. Notre Dame has a 92% chance. Ohio State has a 78% chance. Cincinnati, 60% chance. Those are the 4 teams for there, followed by Northwestern. I don't want to talk about it. Texas A&M, BYU, USC, then Clemson, and then Florida, where the top 5 teams are possibly making the playoffs as we continue down in the season. Alabama has a 94.2% chance of winning. Ohio State has a 71.1% chance of making the playoffs. Notre Dame has a 59.3% chance. Cincinnati has a 35.3% chance. Clemson has a 33.5% chance. And Oregon has a 26.9% chance. BYU is behind USC, who is behind Oregon, and has a 14.1% chance. I feel BYU's, I don't know, they're blowing teams out. Granted, in a classic season, they really haven't played that many great teams, but they still have played extremely well. Zach Wilson is in the Heisman. Now, before we talk about our top 6 teams, what are some criteria you look for when you are choosing your college football top 4?
So kind of what I look for is my number one ranking point is consistency. Did you do this every game, and how well did you do it? And a big part of it for me is third down. And I want to look at how teams do on third down. It's kind of like because the records don't matter as much to me once you're stacking up this kind of thing. Of course, the records matter, but when you kind of dive into it, the records, once you get past the records and you're like, okay, we have it here. What do you do on third down? And to me, if a team is 9 for 16 instead of 5 for 16, and on defense they're the reverse and they're playing well, it's a huge thing for me because third down shows how talented you are because it's a big spot, and 2, how well you're coached. And I think like that for me, when I look at that, that's something I actually consider when it comes down to like multiple teams have the same record. Both of them didn't play great competition. How are we going to rank them? That's something that I look into, their proficiencies on third down. And another thing I look into is really, especially when it comes to the teams that don't play a lot of competition, is I look at kind of how their defense has been playing, because we know when it comes down to it in the college football playoffs that defense only comes from the SEC for the most part, Ohio State, and sometimes in the Big Ten. But when Oklahoma makes it, they usually let up like 50 points. And it's a huge, huge part of it. I mean, they'll score 45 per game, but it doesn't matter every college football play if you're going to let up 55. That's another big thing for me. And it's kind of like, will you be able to compete at that highest level? And it's a big reason why I'm very broken down when it comes to my rankings and how I'm going to deliver those rankings. I need to go deeper into stats and performances in order to make the best decision on what competition will be the best for the college football playoffs.
So I've got more of a basic breakdown right off the top. And there's a few requirements to even be put into the conversation to look deeper into these teams. Did you win your division? If you did not win your division, it means you are not the top 2 teams in your conference, meaning you are not one of the 4 best teams in college football. On paper, you might be. The viewpoint of media, you might be. But if you really look into it, if you couldn't even win your division, you don't belong to be even in the conversation. That's like saying, well, the New York Giants didn't make the playoffs, but let's put them in the Super Bowl. Is the way to look at it.
Yeah.
Did you win your conference? If you were undefeated and you lost to a one-loss team in your conference and it was close, then maybe you stay in the conversation. But if you get blown out, even if you're undefeated, if you get blown out in your conference championship, you're out. How well are you playing down the stretch? I don't care if you put up 65 against Abilene Christian in week 1 and threw for 600 passing yards. How'd you do towards the end? Did you win your rivalry games? Did you finish your season strong? Or did you stumble? I say a loss in the beginning isn't as detrimental as a loss in the middle, which isn't as detrimental as a loss at the end of the season. Barring this season, Wisconsin, I think they're eliminated from the college football playoffs now, unfortunately. If you make it through all those stuff, your defense, like you said, look at the defense. Oklahoma's been blown out in the playoffs multiple times. Like you said, they put up 45, but they put up 55. Offense may win you the games, but defense wins championships. As much as we want to ignore that idea, we love 45 to 42 games, final score games. Still the reality of the situation. Alabama, how many players have they sent to the NFL draft on defense? Clemson, how many players have they sent to the NFL draft on defense? LSU, a bunch of guys either opt out of this season or are going to go high in the draft or went pretty high in the first few rounds in the draft. Ohio State was always in the hunt. Good defense. Wisconsin, who doesn't recruit as well. What do they have all the time that keeps them in the conversation? Although they don't have the flashiest team, defense. Now we got a quarterback. Those are rough weeks. So, defense. And those are like my big 3 criteria to even get into the conversation. But I've talked enough about that. Then you get into the nitty-gritty, crossovers, and all that stuff. So, who are your top 4 and last 2 in? Or last 2 out?
All right, so my top 4, number 1 is Alabama. I mean, let's be honest, they're Alabama, and they've been playing some good football. Number 2 is Notre Dame. They won the game against Clemson. I mean, I know Lawrence wasn't there, but they won a game against Clemson. They're undefeated. They're playing some good football as well. Number 3, I actually have Clemson over Ohio State at number 3 right now, just because they've played more. Ohio State's had more games. You know, they haven't been able to play, and with Lawrence, they're going to be nearly impossible to beat. And then number 4, I have Ohio State. Ohio State is my number 4. But those are my top 4, and the first 2 out for me are actually Cincinnati and Florida. And a lot of people have Texas A&M in the mix. They have BYU in the mix. For me, it's Cincinnati and then Florida. Kyle Trask is putting up an unbelievable season. That kid is really, really good. And Cincinnati they're a very gritty team. They're not gonna. They're not so flashy. They're nothing like that. They're a gritty team who will fight you to the last second of the game, as we saw that this week against UCF, a team who's been historically good in the last few years. And Cincinnati just, at the end of the game on a long drive, just put their foot on the necks of UCF and finish them off. And they did a really, really good job. And they do that every week. They play a complete game offensively and defensively, and they finish the game. So those are my first 2 out. And again, just to reiterate, Alabama 1, Notre Dame 2, Clemson 3, Ohio State 4, and the first 2 looking from the outside to Cincinnati and Florida.
Mine's a little more interesting. I said number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Notre Dame. I don't trust Notre Dame, but at this point, you beat Clemson. You're number 2. You're undefeated. You've played more games than most of the other teams. You're number 2 right now. Number 3 is Ohio State, just because of how well. I know Justin Fields threw multiple interceptions this past week, but they're playing well. They held on against a really good Indiana team. And then my fourth team, this is going to be a shocker, but it's Cincinnati. I like the Bearcats this season. They're playing really well. And I think of all years, you got to give the shot to the little guy this year. First team out, Clemson. Notre Dame loss really hurt them right now. Who's playing really well and is undefeated is the way I look at it right now.
How well are you playing, and are you keeping up with everybody else? Number 5 is Clemson. Number 6 is BYU, followed by Florida. I mean, BYU is blowing everyone out right now, except for one little scare earlier in the season. They're playing extremely well. They have a Heisman caliber quarterback in Zach Wilson, who is projected to go in the top 10 in the NFL draft this season. You can't not have them up there right now. So moving on, we're going to go to the Big Ten officiating. Now, Nick, did you see what happened at the end of that Minnesota-Iowa game?
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that was. I just sat there. I was watching the game. Surprising, I was actually watching this game while, I was doing a bunch of other stuff, around this time of year. You got to do some stuff. And I'm watching it. I'm doing whatever I have to do. And I was like, jaw dropped. I was speechless.
Yeah, it was ugly. It was the Minnesota-Iowa game, and then I'm going to get called out in the comment section because, being a Wisconsin Badger fan saying this, but the Northwestern Wisconsin game was horrendous officiating, too. But I want to talk about the game on Friday, and then we'll get to the game on Saturday. It's towards the end of the game. This is a call that could change everything. Don't make the call. Especially if it's a little pitter-patter call that maybe is debatable. Maybe you would throw the flag. But if you are even thinking about it, don't throw the flag towards the end of the game. Unless it's obvious, you don't throw the flag. I didn't see any offensive pass interference. Did you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And also, you said with the flags, you throw that, and if you throw a flag, you throw it with conviction. So, when you do throw a flag, don't pick it up after. Okay, that's another pet peeve of mine at the end of games. Don't throw a flag because usually your first inclination, your gut feeling is correct. You can't have these game-changing calls and no calls at the end of games. You just can't.
And then let's get into the Wisconsin-Northwestern game, which was an ugly game on Wisconsin's side. Wisconsin did not deserve to win that game the way they played. But you've got to call a spade a spade. The officiating was horrible. The first was the pass interference call on one of the Northwestern's first touchdown drives, where the offensive player literally stops, pushes back on the Wisconsin player, and gets Wisconsin flagged for it. The second eye-opening play, which is all over social media, is Wisconsin's pick that got called defensive pass interference, where the ref threw the flag when the players were 2 yards apart. He's reaching into his belt, throwing the flag. Wisconsin even caught up to the guy. and he's like fiddling with his flag. It felt like the Wisconsin corners couldn't even breathe on the Northwestern wide receivers without getting flagged. Our defense played amazing. The way our offense played. The way the offense was playing, we didn't belong to be in that game. We got one of the best defenses in the nation, let me tell you that. The officiating was bad on the Big Ten this week. And that's one of the games I was able to see. I wasn't able to see every Big Ten game. It's embarrassing. As a Big Ten football fan, as someone who waves the flag of the Big Ten, get it together, guys. Get maybe one slightly bad called game. But to have two costly games, fine time on each day, officiated horribly, is just embarrassing. I get it, a lot of these guys are volunteers and working different jobs. But if you're going to go in, do the job right. Now, I think instant replay ruins a lot of this stuff. Russ' worst enemies is TV camera replays. And Russ will, referees are humans. They'll mess up. It just sucks when it's on prime time during big games. But I want to move to the pain of a Wisconsin sports fan this weekend. Oh, was it painful this weekend between the Packers and the Badgers. I couldn't get a win. I'm acting like a 5-year-old towards the end of the Wisconsin game, stomping my feet with the referees. And then the Packers blow a 14-point lead the following day. I texted my friends, I'm done with Wisconsin sports. I'm done with sports in general. We're ending the channel today. It's over, guys. It's over. I just can't go on anymore. The pain is too much. And I'm a spoiled fan. I will admit that I've been a spoiled football fan for the past decade. Wisconsin has played extremely well. The Packers have played extremely well over this past decade. I'm sorry, it still sucks. The Packers blow a 14-point lead. The Badgers, this is triangle photo. I don't know if other schools make this, but it's a big Wisconsin, like, kind of meme where it says, like, getting your hopes up, starting to believe, utter heartbreak or something like that. And then it's just this rotating triangle that Wisconsin fans, football and basketball, feel every year. We're spoiled. Yes, I know that we're spoiled. We play really well. We're the only school who was ranked in the top 10 for both football and basketball this week. Impressive to say, because the debate is you're either a football or you're a basketball school. Wisconsin's both. They don't recruit highly recruited players usually. They know how to coach. But I start getting my hopes up and I start thinking, hey, maybe I should plan to go to Indianapolis for if the Badgers make the Big Ten championship game. Started looking at flights. Started looking at drives. Bad about reaching out to some friends. And I'm like, what if they make the playoffs? Started looking at flights. Started looking at where the locations might be. And then they lose. I can't get my hopes up. Jonathan Taylor had a good game again after a few weeks of being off. At least, if we're going to lose the team, let them have a badge on the team. That helped out a lot. But enough of my complaining. Game of the week for college football this week. What game are you looking forward to most?
I mean, coming up this weekend, you mentioned it. We got rivalry weekend, and for some of the programs, but I kind of don't have my eye on a specific game. Like there's a few that I'm interested in. I really want to see I want to see what Cincinnati does. Like, you know what I mean? Like every week, Cincinnati for me is must watch football because they're the most exciting team to kind of like be on the edge of college football playoffs since UCF was a couple years ago and Boise. And like they just, I don't know. I'm even though they beat my UCF, I really want to see, what they can do. And the other matchup I was interested in was on Friday, Notre Dame and North Carolina. Just because I want to see.
Anyone mention that game because I'm really looking forward to that game too.
Yeah, just because I want to see how Sam Howell does against Notre Dame, and I want to see if Notre Dame they've just been winning, but I really want to see how Sam Howell does against them. That's kind of the whole big thing for me.
Yeah, if there's a game that could really open the door for a non-Power 5 conference team and really create chaos for the college football playoff committee, that game on Friday. North Carolina was up as a top 5 team. They had 2 heartbreaking losses. They're still a pretty good team with a really good head coach. If North Carolina pulls that upset, all of a sudden there's not going to be 2 ACC teams in the college football playoffs because you're not going to put a 2-loss non-champion in the playoffs. You would think. And I got to say, I think Clemson with Trevor Lawrence puts a beat down on Notre Dame in the ACC championship, especially because they'd be playing angry.
And they got their quarterback.
But the other one is not a really overly hyped game, but Wisconsin, Minnesota, Paul Bunyan's X, the game we circle on the calendar every year in Madtown, Wisconsin. It's always exciting. It's always fun. And the Badgers have won a majority of the matchups. And it's my senior year at Wisconsin, so I'm hoping we win the Paul Bunyan's X and hold on to it for another year. Like you said, Cincinnati's must-watch football. You want to know what my must-watch team is? I really want to do a video on one of their players. Coastal Carolina. With the teal turf, projected to finish last in their conference, and they're sitting at 8-0, beating Appalachian State. They had never beaten before. Coming back and winning that game, oh God, that's a team that's exciting. Specialists with mullets all over. Offensive line that they have a few players that aren't over 6 feet. That's a team that's exciting to watch. Because anything you look at with that team, they only became Division I only a few years ago. They're a team you look at, that's supposed to be playing well. And they are, and it's so fun to watch. I think their coaches do like a wrestling matchup at the end after wins, like where they recreate scenes from like the WWE or something. I thought I saw something. And their mascot is a Chanticleer, which I believe is a rooster, which is awesome. They play Texas State at 3 p.m. Central on ESPN+. They are, I think, big favorites in that game. But that's the team I'm excited to watch. And then, I didn't even realize that this was this weekend. It's the Iron Bowl this weekend. I'm not used to that being earlier in the season. I guess it's because of the messed up season. But that should be a fun game. So those are the 3 games I'm looking at watching. Now, let's move into the NFL. Is the Kansas City Chiefs, Las Vegas Raiders, I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders, the best new rivalry in football, Nick?
I think so. And watching the game last night, and Mahomes didn't look uncomfortable. The interception was a miscommunication, whatever like that. Everyone's talking about. But John Gruden, he built his team to basically compete with the Chiefs, and he did it differently. The Chargers tried to do it with a lot of corners. The Broncos tried to do it with a lot of pass rush. But what John Gruden did was he said, okay, what does Kansas City do well? Whatever. Don't care. We need to do everything well. We need to have a balanced attack. We need to run the football. We need to be able to pass the football efficiently. And we need to be able to play tough defense. Right? Now, their defense may not be great, but they have a lot of gritty guys on their defense. Jonathan Abram.
I love Max Crosby.
Max, yeah, he's insane. The guy is crazy. Okay, Clelin Ferrell has not been the pick they thought he'd pan out to be, but don't worry, Crosby took care of it. Okay, he took care of it. That guy is a monster. And on the back end, they also have Damon Arnett, who he's a rookie, and he's gonna have his struggles, but guy's fearless. They said, put me on Travis Kelce, okay. Put me on Tyreek Hill, okay. Like, he just did it. He does it. He may get beat from time to time, but he's fearless. And when it comes to the Chiefs, the Chiefs almost lost the game last night. They left too much time on the clock for Mahomes. Can't do that with Las Vegas. But the Chiefs almost went 0-2 this season against Oakland. Oh, Oakland. Jeez, Las Vegas. They almost went 0-2 against Las Vegas and these Raiders. And it's kind of crazy to think that if there's a kryptonite to Mahomes and company, it might be their division rival. And, division rivalries, the classic ones are Giants, Philly, Dallas Eagles, Pittsburgh Steelers, Ravens, which is still a very good one, Pittsburgh Steelers, Ravens. The AFC East kind of got drowned out. They used to have really good rivalries, the Jets and the Patriots. Jets have been so bad. Now the Patriots are bad too. A lot of these rivalries kind of got drowned out, and the AFC West is kind of on the forefront of the NFL right now after years of not being good, being really bad defenses. They were kind of like the Big 12. They were the Big 12. They scored a lot of points, didn't have good defenses, and now they got the Chiefs defense, who played really poorly last night, but overall this season they have been good. And you have the Chargers, who Chargers are mind-numbing, but the whole point is they all geared up to beat Patrick Mahomes. They all made the moves they did to try to stop Mahomes. And I think what John Gruden did was he ignored what you're supposed to counter that with, and he decided, I'm going to go out and make a well-balanced attack, and we are going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it didn't happen last night. However, it happened a few weeks ago. And last night was just another indication of John Gruden being the right guy for that job, and John Gruden being able to, they basically created this new rivalry that, reignited an old rivalry, but it created now the best one, in my opinion, in the league. And you can kind of compare it to the Ravens and Steelers of recent years, but I really do think this is the most exciting rivalry. And it's not as much chippy as some of the other ones, but this one is one where you're going to need to watch for the next few years.
You forgot to mention the Bears-Packers, dude. Come on.
I mean, the best the Bears have done in that rivalry is Jay Cutler, okay?
Well, they're competing for the division this year. But,
that's true.
Which I'm kind of disappointed about it. This was the year the Packers could have run away with that division. But John Gruden said, in a copycat league where everybody's trying to copy each other, he said, no, I'm going my own way. Everybody told John Gruden to throw Derek Carr off to the streets and move on. Gruden said, I'm going to give him a chance. And Carr hasn't been a superstar. He played really well. And I'd consider him a top 15 quarterback. I don't know if you would.
Borderline.
I almost said top 10. And we're going to go top 15. But I mean, that Oakland Raiders team is going to be an exciting team to, or no, Las Vegas Raiders. God, stop saying Oakland. That Las Vegas Raiders team in that Death Star Stadium is going to be an exciting team to watch over the next few years. It's sad to see them not in Oakland, and you would have loved to see this rivalry really explode in Oakland. But I want to go to Vegas, have a little fun on this at the hotel, and then go to watch a Chiefs Raiders game. That's an exciting thing to do. I mean, I want to go see that stadium anyways, but still. No one thought the Raiders would be able to beat the Chiefs a few weeks ago, and they did, and everybody was surprised. No one was as surprised when they competed with the Chiefs this time around. It's going to, like you said, it's going to be an exciting rivalry for years to come. Now, moving on, you mentioned Philadelphia. Now, there's this TV show called Community, I love. They have a episode. One of the characters is in a class called Nicolas Cage, good or bad. Well, I have a question to ask you. Carson Wentz, good or bad?
Very, very, very bad. Okay, so there's a lot going on in Philadelphia, and none of it seems to be good, especially when it comes to this quarterback. Now, Carson Wentz is all the talent in the world, and usually, you know, he's kind of a slightly above average. He's usually an above average quarterback who makes one crazy splash play per game, right? I think it's a fair assessment of Carson Wentz. But this year, he has not made that splash play. He's not made that play that makes him look special. And the matter of the fact is, he's not a reason they're winning. They are not winning football games because he is not protecting the football, okay? Carson Wentz is a huge problem. And a huge part of his problem, like I just said, is the turnovers. He's having mind-numbing interceptions. You can't be paid the way you are and still throw those interceptions. You can't. I'll go a breakdown of his salary in a second, but I don't know if you saw yesterday. I'm going to ask you, did you see that pick that he threw against the Browns yesterday on the little dump off to Miles Sanders?
I saw both picks. Where the thing, I don't know if you could really decide this season. He's had a horrible season. He's killed my fantasy team. So I didn't want to draft him, but got auto-drafted to me and I lost internet. But it almost feels like he's trying to do too much for the team sometimes. They've had so many injuries and somehow are still in the playoff race because of how messed up the NFC East is. Could it be partly that to consider where he hasn't had much around him? I mean, most of his wide receiving core was injured for half the season. And he's just tried to do too much, and through that, killed his confidence. Is now playing even worse than when he didn't have any weapons. I mean, that's time to move on from him.
I mean, that's a fair point that you make. That's a fair point you make. But then I go to then look at other people in certain situations where they don't have a lot of weapons, people are injured, and I go to Jacksonville, and Jacksonville had Jake Luton playing at almost an elite level versus the Packers. And that's Jake Luton. And they've been doing it with Gardner Minshew, 6th round picks. And the whole idea behind this
interceptions yesterday.
Yeah, well, Jake Luton played the Steelers yesterday. But the whole point is Carson Wentz does this on a weekly basis. It's 2+ turnovers every week. And I do understand what you're saying. He's trying to do too much. And a lot of it has to do with coaching. Now, I don't think he gets an excuse. I absolutely do not think he gets an excuse for the way he's played. Absolutely not. He's played a lot of very poor football. He's making boneheaded rookie mistakes that you see rookies make in their rookie year and never do it again. He's doing it time and time again. You see him making the stupid crossbody, just chuck it on the other side of the field. And it's just, I get it. He's getting pummeled. He's getting beat up. His offensive line is not good. It's not healthy. But not for nothing, you're paying him $18 million this year, 19 next year, and then 35 for the next 4 years. He's being paid a lot of money. So in actuality, you're not going to be able to keep the talent you have on your roster, even though it's not necessarily there. So he's going to have to deal with this. Do I think it's time to move on? I don't know. The matter of fact is the fact that we have to have this conversation about Wentz after just inking a 4-year, $130 million deal extension onto the end of his contract is extremely alarming. And the whole thing is Carson Wentz going to be able to pick it up? And, a lot of people like to rag on quarterbacks for turnovers. Aaron Rodgers, you never had to deal with that. Okay. But you want to rag on Daniel Jones about fumbles, which is a very fair point. Interceptions. Carson Wentz has been on pace with Daniel Jones in the last 2 years. They have almost identical numbers of fumbles and interceptions. And Daniel Jones has been in the league for like 20 games.
And Daniel Jones is also getting paid a whole lot less.
Exactly. The money is the most important thing here. And the fact is he gets paid too much to not play well enough.
But yes, he gets no excuse for anything. I was just stating those other points. So, maybe this is why it is rookie mistakes, and it is worrisome. You see, maybe you bench him for a game. With Jalen Hurts in, you did just spend the second-round pick on Hurts. See what Hurts does? If Hurts plays bad, then it's the team as a whole, and then you could eliminate that it's possibly Wentz. Now, if you're getting paid $35 million a year, 2 years from now, you're expected to lift the team up and have them perform to a high level and not struggle this way and just be like, well, the backup didn't play well either, so it must be the whole team. You got to look at the GM. You let Nick Foles walk, and you could have traded him and gotten something for him, but instead you just said, well, you go walk and sign a contract somewhere else because you were worried about Wentz. If you were worried about Wentz, why did you have him sign this contract?
It's a very fair point, and we're not blaming this all on Carson Wentz because it's definitely not all Carson Wentz. Absolutely not. But he's played poorly. We get it. Doug Pederson, I feel, is just as big or even a bigger problem than Carson Wentz. Doug Pederson has been absolutely atrocious this year. Now, one thing I will say is when I watched, Philly was like this, exciting, great offensive scheme, this and that, like the whole 9 yards. That's what they were when Doug Pederson came in. And the matter of fact is he's getting too cute now. I mean, when you have to look back to when they played the Giants and they went, they are down by 4. They score touchdown. They're down by 4. Extra point makes it 3. Going for 2 there shows how little he understands about 1, the game, and 2, his team. You bring the game within 3 points. It's just week after week, Doug Pederson just does mind-numbing things that are just so bad. And I mean, the fact that they have Miles Sanders in the backfield, right? They have Miles Sanders in the backfield. He's a good running back. They do not run him out of a single back or I formation at all. They don't. It's always a shotgun handoff of an inside zone or a draw. They never give the guy, stand 7 yards in the backfield. Here's a stretch play. Or, here's a dive play. He gets none of those. He gets the inside zones and the ones where his offensive line is not good enough to hold. They're not. So he's getting hit in the backfield and he's not playing good football. Plus, he's got ball security issues. He always has. It's just Doug Pederson does not play to the strength of his players, and he sort of thinks his scheme is like just better than everybody else. He thinks he thinks he's smarter than he actually is, and he's outplaying himself instead of the other teams.
So let's talk about the NFC East. You said you had some winners of the NFC East this week.
Yeah, we had 2 winners this week. I don't understand either. One of the winners, unfortunately, it happened to It happened with an injury to a guy we all love, the NFL loves. Joe Burrow tore his ACL. Hopefully he gets better soon. It looked like he avoided a major injury. But we're really reading the reports this morning. I'm glad he's going to be okay. But Washington, they won the game. They beat down on Cincinnati, who is now a team that cannot compete. Cincinnati looks like they're going to be tanking for another great pick. Looks like Joe Burrow, if they let AJ Green walk, may get his buddy Jamar on his
Or you
roster.
go offensive line.
Yeah, they should go offensive line after he got pummeled yesterday. But Washington, hats off to them. They played some good football. They rushed the passer really well. Alex Smith is playing good football. I mean, good for him. You feel great for Alex Smith. They have some tough games down the schedule to look at. But they won yesterday, and then Dallas beat Minnesota yesterday, which none of us really saw coming. Minnesota's probably kicking themselves right now. They knew there were plays that they should have had. They should have had this game, and when you look back at it, there's probably 4 to 5 plays where that changed the game for them, and those 4 or 5 plays changed the entire course of everything. Certain play calls, drop passes that Justin Jefferson, guy's really, really good, but he dropped a pass on 2nd and 6, which then ended up being 3rd and 6 and then 4th and 6, and they lost the game. He had a wide open first down, dropped the ball. It's the little things that they're going to be kicking themselves for after this one. Giants had a bye week, and Philly, we just talked about, lost again to Cleveland. So what's your opinion on the NFC least? We'll call it the NFC least.
I think you're going to have a 6-win team in the division, which is kind of gross to have a playoff team that didn't even have a winning record. I just want to say, Blake, I agree with you. I think the Bengals should draft Sewell as well. I might have butchered the way I pronounced his name. Do have a Who Is video in the works I want to do on him. So be on the lookout for that come January time. But with the NFC East or least, it's you feel bad for Dak. This could have been the year Dak the Cowboys to the playoffs and finally earned himself a contract that he so well deserves, in my opinion. Carson Wentz also had the opportunity to bring the Eagles well, but dealt with injuries all season long. The Giants and Redskins have no right to be competing yet, especially with Saquon out for the New York. And they're still in the hunt. And the Redskins, it's great to see Alex Smith back. You love seeing, Washington football team, not Washington football team. Washington football team. I'm sorry for that. It's lit. But with Alex Smith back, it's great to see him playing well. And Chase Young is looking like the monster everybody expected him out. But can we talk about how Joe Burrow got hurt? Chase Young stayed healthy, but Okuda, who was the 3rd overall pick, 2 of the top 3 overall picks left their games with injuries, which you hate to see. I knew Joe Burrow was probably going to get hurt with the amount of hits he was taking all season long in Cincinnati. I know this isn't talking about the NFC East, but I would have, even if it wasn't a severe injury, I would have benched him for the rest of the season, kept him safe, got that high pick, and protect him. Because he is a good quarterback. But if I had to choose a team to win the NFC East, I don't know.
This is 4 bad choices.
Yeah. It's like you didn't study for a test. You have no idea. You haven't been to this class all semester long.
All these multiple
And you
choice
don't-
answers look exactly the same.
Bad quarterback for the Cowboys. Bad quarterback for the Eagles. Mediocre quarterback for the Giants. I know, I'm sorry, but
He's mediocre. I'd say so.
mediocre. Recovering quarterback for the Washington football team. Look at wide receiving course. I mean, probably out of all those teams, it probably has to go to the Cowboys. I don't know how you feel. I mean, you can make the argument for the Washington football team, but I don't think it's the Giants. I don't think it's the Eagles.
So watching the NFC East over the last 10 weeks has been pretty brutal, but the one thing that a lot of people have a consensus on, and they talk about it on Get Up, they talked about it on First Take, is that the Giants are coached better than any team in the NFC.
Yeah.
They're coached better than any team in the East. Joe Judge has done an outstanding job there. He has done he coached this team up where the team doesn't have that much talent, but he's coached them up after their star running back. Their star of the team, they lose him on the third play of week 2, and now they're in position to take control. And really, when you look at the Giants and you look at the Eagles and Washington and Cowboys schedule, you need to look at a couple things to see if they'll make the playoffs. Number one is you need to check their schedule and you need to strength the schedule. The Giants and the Eagles have brutal schedules down the stretch. Brutal. The Giants play 3 now. They were, as of last week, they were 3, 6, and 3 teams they needed to play. The Giants play the Cardinals. The Giants still play the Ravens, and the Giants still play the Browns, right? And they got to play Seattle as well. And it's really, really tough down the stretch. Philly also has to play those guys and the Packers, so we're not even going to go there. But Dallas, interestingly enough, has the easiest schedule of any of the teams. They have Washington next week, the Ravens, then they have the Burrow-less Bengals and the Garoppolo-less 49ers, and then they go to the Eagles and the Giants. So it's a winnable schedule. My winner is going to be the Giants, not just because I'm a Giants fan and I have to say that, but the way the Giants have played over the last few weeks. I mean, if you look at the way they play football, the New York Giants, they don't lose games by a large margin, even though they're not as talented as everybody else. It goes back to the 49er game. They got absolutely blown out in week 3. And since then, they've been one possession away from winning every single game. They lost the game to the Rams on the Rams 11-yard line. They lost the game to Dallas on a game-winning field goal. They beat Washington. They lost to Philly after blowing an 11-point fourth quarter lead, which guarantee they don't do it again. They lost to the Buccaneers on a 2-point conversion. And the way you look at it is the Buccaneers are one of the best teams in the league. The Giants should have been blown out, but they were not. And I think that game is kind of a measure. You need to measure the progress of a rebuild. And it kind of showed you that if you're coached well enough and if you believe in if you're buying what your coach is selling, you will go out and you will play hard for any week. And not for nothing, I think Philly, besides the quarterback position, or even with the quarterback position, I think Philly is the most talented team out of every team in the East. I know they're hurt. I know they're banged up. They're the most talented team. But it's clear that they're not buying into Doug Pederson. And it's clear that Dallas, even though they have a lot of weapons, they don't buy into Mike McCarthy. I see Washington. They're buying into Ron Rivera.
Yeah, Ron. The 2 teams that weren't expected to be competing for the playoffs in the NFC East are both very well coached, and both teams bought into their coaches. I hate that I'm going to say this. I think the Cowboys, with their remaining schedule and just the talent they have, even with backup quarterbacks, I think they somehow figure a way to make the playoffs.
No. I think you're right about that. Their schedule's very easy. I mean, the Giants have the Burrows Bengals next week, but they have to play Seattle, then Arizona, then Cleveland, then Baltimore, and their season ends at home versus Dallas. So that's really not a good schedule. They need to take They need to beat the Browns and then beat another one of these 7-win teams or 6-win teams if you're talking about Baltimore. They need to beat one of them. And I think it's going to be too tough to do. I still think they can win.
Looking good going forward now.
They need to. There's 6 games left. They need to go 3-3. They go 3-3. They go to the playoffs. They don't go 3-3. They don't go to the playoffs. It's simple as that. And a lot of people, ask, especially about the Giants, because I am a big Giants fan and I go in depth about them. When do you say, okay, we're not going to do this. Let's tank for the pick? And my answer is you don't. You don't do that. You can't, because you know what? It comes to a point where enough tanking for the pick. You need to start winning games to create a winning culture. You need to. It's about time that, some of these programs and their fans realize you can't just keep tanking every year for a better pick. You're still going to be bad if you don't have a winning culture. And the NFC least has
New York Jets.
Yeah, the New York Jets, exactly. Oh, they had the 2nd overall pick 2 years ago. How'd that turn out? Quinn Williams, he's not coached right. He's playing better now, but the guy was a non-miss prospect and he's not coached right and he was struggling. Okay, and it's just year after year, it's the same thing with the Jets. And we're not even going to get into the Jets. The Jets are the same thing every year, but it's believing in your coach and believing in what they're selling that's getting Washington and New York, in the hunt. And I think Washington, I think honestly, I think Dallas is a good chance, but I think Washington and New York are the teams to beat in the division. Now, Washington got swept by New York, and New York has the tiebreaker, which is a big issue. And they do, however, have the tiebreaker right now over Philly and over Dallas, which is huge. They beat Philly and they beat Dallas. So down the stretch, it's going to be really cool to watch what they do. This division is actually going to be entertaining to see at the end just because of how bad they are. But you're actually going to see some good football from New York and Washington, like serviceable football. Philly's going to be an embarrassment, and Dallas is either going to play a good game or they're going to get blown out of the water.
So we're going to sprint through the remaining segments we had left. Steelers 10-0, Super Bowl contender or Super Bowl pretender?
I think this week's telling. This week is really telling. It's a Baltimore team who's pissed off. They just lost. Baltimore should be mad. They blew this game. Absolutely blew this game. A.J. Brown stomped them out in the last 2 minutes.
Dude, oh my God.
Yeah, A.J. Brown was an absolute menace. And, it's time for Lamar to step up. He's played good football. He's played mostly mistake-free football. But the matter of fact is he doesn't have the weapons, and he needs to do more than he's been doing. They need to the Ravens need to get more creative with him, and I think they're going to be struggling. And this week is going to be telling versus Steelers. If the Steelers can win this game, they are a contender. Because and it's not that they're not at 10-0, okay? They're the most untalked about 10-0 team of all time. But there's a reason, okay? They've played, I did the math last night, they've played teams with a combined wins of 23. They've played a lot of 1-win teams this year. And the fact of the matter is you can only play who's on your schedule, yes, but they need to win football games, okay? That was excluding Baltimore, but they need to win football games. So they need to beat Baltimore this week, and I'm in. You beat Baltimore this week, I'm in. Big Ben and the offense, they look good. Ben looks good. He looks strong. And, so time and time again, his offensive linemen are peeling him off the turf, but he's doing what he can to play good football, and that defense is lights out. The Minkah Fitzpatrick trade is going to go down as one of the greatest trades in Steeler history, in my opinion.
T.J. Watt stealing the NFL draft.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I dropped to the end of the first round. I had the Packers pass up on that, but still hurts. Take some time in New Orleans. Sean Payton.
Sean Payton looks like a genius now. He looks like evil genius.
Did you see the tweet he retweeted?
Yeah, he's a. You know what I'm saying? He's
on Roddy White. That was hilarious.
Yeah, no, Sean Payton, guy is just like a troll. But I tell you, he outdid himself on this one. Taysom Hill experiment was a full-fledged success. Now everyone's like, how are you not giving time to Jameis? What's going on? It was a full success. Sean Payton, not only did he, with Taysom Hill back, he revitalized Michael Thomas, who has had a rough year and it looked like he was missing his confidence. He revitalized Thomas, and he gave Kamara the much-needed break. And Taysom Hill balled out. Played great football. And I know they beat Atlanta, but that Taysom time, I tell you, Drew Brees has not been great this year at all. He's not. His arm strength is diminished. We already knew that. And he's been struggling big time. This is the kind of offense Sean Payton wants to run. So whether it's with Trey Lance out of the NFL draft next year or Taysom Hill in the future, I think we're seeing the future of the Saints offense.
Do you go back to Drew Brees?
I think you have to. I think you have to. And I think there'll be more packages for Taysom Hill. I mean, they have a lot. And they've been doing it in key situations. Hill's been in the game. I think you have to go to Brees. There's no question about it. Unless Taysom Hill in the next, I don't know, Brees doesn't come back to week 16 and Taysom Hill is 5-0 by that time. I don't know. I don't think you can take Taysom Hill out or take Drew Brees' spot away from him. He's earned it. You know, he's earned it. He's been there. And listen, he's won games this year. Don't get me wrong. It's not like he's played poorly. It's just Drew Brees is not the same guy he used to be, and you're not going to see the performance from your wide receivers. And in those games where you need to throw the ball 35, 40 times, will Brees be able to hang around? I don't know. They haven't had to do it this year, and in the times they did, they didn't win the game.
Now, what game are you most looking forward to this week on Thanksgiving? Stuff your face with football. We got college, we got NFL, we got long week of sports.
All right, so I'm going to say this, okay? Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm most excited for Washington, Dallas. Now, listen, okay? Before you're like, what's wrong with this guy? There's a lot riding on this game. If Washington sweeps Dallas, it basically puts Dallas in the gutter, right? And if Dallas beats Washington, it puts them in the gutter. So this is like an elimination game, kind of, for the NFC least. It's an elimination game. And to get that one up in your division is really, really important. And I think these teams are they're so different. And Dallas got beat down so bad last time. We're going to have to see what happens. That's what I'm most excited for. I know everyone's expecting me to say Steelers, Ravens, or Notre Dame, North Carolina, but for me, it is definitely Washington and Dallas.
I'm going Steelers, Ravens for the NFL. Just because. Your fantasy. We'll end this on fantasy football. Talk about fantasy football.
Yeah, so I got 3 fantasy football feast and famine players. I'm gonna give you the famine first. I'm a no-go. I'm a no-go on the Cowboys wide receivers this week versus Washington, and I'm a no-go on Juju Smith-Schuster. He had a tough week this week, and he got banged up with a little toe injury. I'm sure he'll be fine. But yeah, no Ben, no Juju, no Cowboys wide receivers, and no J.K. Dobbins. Okay, I'm gonna have to emphasize this here. J.K. Dobbins has put up a good performance multiple times in the last few weeks. I get it. Slow down. I know he's going to be the future back there. He's Mark Ingram 2.0. He's better. He's faster. It's not going to be a good fantasy week for you if you start them. And I'm going to give you now my feast guys. Give me Marvin Jones. That secondary up, in Houston, not so good. Throw as you will. Cam Newton had 350 passing yards, and Cam Newton's arm has been disintegrated. That is right. So definitely take Marvin Jones. J.D. McKissick's another one. I think if this Dallas game gets into a shootout or Washington gets behind, they're going to be dumping the ball off a lot to J.D. McKissick. Chase Claypool is a must start. I don't care what you say. I don't care who you play. You must start. You must start and play Chase Claypool every single week. The guy is an absolute freak. And Brandon Cooks is my last feast guy. I think Brandon Cooks has quietly put up a really good season, although he's not DeAndre Hopkins. He's quietly put up a great season with with Watson in Houston. And I think against that secondary without Jeff Okudah, I think, he may torch them for a long touchdown or two.
I don't have any of those players on my team.
Yeah, I kind of went for the waiver guys and some guys that you might have been unsure about.
Take that fantasy fancy advice and run with it. Go crush it this week, folks, in fantasy football. That's all we got to talk about today. Just want to mention one last thing. www.etg.today. New website up. We're going to have fantasy football articles going up. We're going to have all the Who Is videos going up there. I might be writing some opinion pieces, especially around the college football playoffs. Patreon is up. If you want to keep us running, help us, support us. Some extreme. We have a complete college basketball Power 6 conference preview coming up this week on the Patreon that our buddy Andrew has worked tirelessly on. Check that out. And then coming in 2021 is the merch. We're excited. We love you guys. We got a collaboration with Cole Adams coming in the pipeline and a bunch of other collabs coming down the line. We're doing great things. We're ending this terrible 2020 on a high note. Thank you so much for joining us. Whether you're watching this on the replay or watching this live, we are so thankful for you folks. Remember one thing. Embrace the grind.